I had grown tired of battling pests and disease of the curcubit family. When I learned there was a so-called Bolivian cucumber that sported disease resistance, I had to try it. I bought the seeds and planted them next to my Jerusalem artichokes. I was curious but didn't put too much faith in the plant. It made sure to prove me wrong. The vines had boomed, covering the artichoke stalks. This plant was not kidding. While it took a bit longer than the regular cucumbers to start bearing fruit, the closer we got to the season's end, the more fruitful it became. It was mid to late summer when I went out to gather the first fruits of the harvest. This happened to be the same time that the regular cucumbers began to succumb to their foes. This vine, however, showed strong signs it had only just begun. Indeed, it appeared immune to regular cucumber pests. I would have to assure myself of this as it grew. Was it as trouble-free as claimed by the nursery catalogs? Time would tell. When picked small and tender, the pods have a faint cucumber taste. However, after they grow a bit and become more hollow, they can be used as shells to stuff fillings into. This is the traditional way of eating them, I learned. You can add whatever you want as filling. I had an idea in mind what I would do. I collected some nice pods and had it inside. The pods don't have a strong flavor, but are still distinctive. I knew I wanted to create a dish overflowing with flavor. Spices would add a kick to the recipe I was about to create. In my spice palette, I had a bunch of coarse sea salt, some oregano, turmeric powder, cumin seeds, paprika, and dill seeds. I dropped these into a molcajete or Mexican mortar and pestle and went about grinding everything into powder. The secret to grind spices using a stone molcajete is to work in a regular pace, letting the weight of the stone do the work. While you could use an electric spice or a coffee grinder or even a blender to do this, grinding spices in stone not only harkens back to simpler times, but also is supposed to preserve the aroma of spices better because it does not heat the spices, or so they say. I was going to cook them up in the dish anyway, so it wouldn't make much of a difference. Sometimes it's just fun to do things the old-fashioned way. I poured the ground spice powder into a bowl to marinate the filling. I got a block of tofu and crumbled into the spice mix for it to absorb the flavors. To add a bit of acidity to the dish, a nice vine-ripe tomato would do. I used the yellow brandywine variety, but any tomato works. I cut out the bad bits of the tomato and crushed it into the bowl with the tofu using my hands. Since the achocha starts fruiting when the tomatoes are producing, pairing one with the other works well. Both of them come from South America, so I imagine this would be an authentic pairing. Well, I doubt the Native Americans were enjoying tofu only because they value the rainforest more than fields of soy, and health food stores would not have much of a market differential, considering all their food was already organic. I digress. To the tofu and crushed tomatoes, I poured some olive oil and tamari sauce to taste. Using a spoon, I mixed everything well. Some cooked rice would give substance to the dish, so I dropped some leftover rice I had laying around. This is a great way of using leftover rice, an ubiquitous occurrence in any respectable Brazilian home. Since I had picked a variety of achocha pods, I went about sorting them. The older fruit had started to yellow and become soft. Mature black seeds populated the insides of these, so I reserved them only for saving seed. The ideal fruit for stuffing would be mature enough to have an empty pocket space and loose seeds, but not too ripe already, being soft and falling apart. These pods were overripe and not good for human consumption anymore. I put the good fruit for stuffing into a colander, leaving behind smaller immature fruit. Under running water, I washed the pods so they would be free from any dirt or bugs. In order to fill the pods with the tofu rice stuffing, I made a slit into each pod using a sharp knife. These pods become like pockets once you scoop out the seeds from the inside. You may find either black mature seeds or seeds that are still white and maturing, depending on how old the pod is. If the pod is too young, you will not be able to easily extract the seeds, as early on, they are fused onto the sidewalls of the Achocha. Achocha, also known as caigua, a native plant from the Andes, had not crossed my path before, even though it also comes from South America. While it is not widely known internationally, this vine is an ancient vegetable used by the traditional populations of Peru and Bolivia. I saved the black seeds to plant next year. I then proceeded to stuff the achocha pockets with the tofu rice filling using a spoon. While achocha is called a Bolivian cucumber, I would not go so far to say that they can substitute a regular cucumber. When tender, the pods may resemble somewhat the taste of a cucumber, but as they get old, they become a vegetable in their own right. They have their own distinct taste and texture. The only way to know it is by trying to grow them and eat them yourself. Once filled, I lay them into a baking sheet to cook them in the oven. After arranging all the pods into the baking sheet, I put them into a medium-high oven, letting them cook and get golden brown. While I waited for the main course in the oven, I decided to use the younger leftover pods as a simple stir-fry to try them as an appetizer. I cut the smaller pods with immature seeds into thin slices. The thinner you can cut the slices, the more surface area for flavor development you get. I wanted to caramelize them and thus bring out their sweetness, so I dropped the thin slices into a heated cast iron pan with a bit of olive oil. Using a metal spatula, I constantly turned the thin pieces so that the edges would get golden brown and delicious. After a while, I added a pinch of salt to season them and draw out any excessive moisture. These would be good to enjoy as a topping in an open-faced sandwich, sort of like a Spanish tapa. I cut out a good slice of an artisan bread and toasted it. Then I spread some homemade cilantro lime hummus I had previously made onto the bread to serve as a creamy base and sprinkled the stir-fried achocha slices on top. All I can say is that this was absolutely delicious. After about 20 minutes, I took out the stuffed achochas from the oven. They were soft and golden brown. This was indeed a flavorful dish. If you're curious to know how achocha tastes, you might have to grow it yourself. One thing is true, they are easy to grow.